Hello, this is the Hillbilly Halfwit. Yeah, Gaza, and today we're going to talk about the new farming policy of the UK from Wales, Scotland and Ireland and England. And I saw this on another YouTuber's channel last night and they put a link to it, so I went through it in detail today. And if you're a farmer and you haven't seen this, you only need your head examining, because they want to remove us from the hills. They want to remove stock farming. They want to remove meat eating by 2030. People may think that this is it's all a conspiracy. It ain't no conspiracy. As you will see now, I will show you it's all written into law. So please watch this and share it. I don't think people have any idea what the UK's farming policy is now. It's absolutely incredibly bad, and they want to remove small farming altogether. So this is it. National Food Strategy. I had a look through this now. I spent an hour reading through most of it. I'm not going to read it all. It's the removal of stock farming from Wales and other areas, Scotland and Ireland. Removal of small farms. They actually put a piece in here, which I'll show you, that they want to remove the small farms that aren't making any money. They're not hiding it. I can't read it all, so I've just highlighted some bits, okay? People and the land. This should make people just quiver to think this is in a food strategy. We have talked a lot about land and food in this chapter, but what are the people? Much of our agricultural land was created by sweeping people off the countryside to create sheep ranches. Started with the enclosure of the 13th century and ended with the brutal Scottish clearances of the 18th and 19th centuries. If you were to read the debate over restoring nature to farmland in some newspapers, you would imagine that turning land over to carbon sequestration and nature recovery might involve a similar thing. This does not need to be the case. Let me read it again. This does not need to be the case. They didn't say that isn't going to happen. They said this does not need to be the case. Many upland farmers are already reducing the numbers of sheep they graze, introducing hardy native cattle into their grazing, allowing areas of land to flood and building ponds and hedges and planting trees. It's all here in black and white, people. They want the stock farmers off the hills, especially small stock farmers. Let's go across to the other side here. I'm not going to read it all. It'd take too long. And I see other people in our community who aren't farmers also planting trees and hedges, or creating wetlands, or helping to coordinate our efforts. These things bring separate worlds together, and the old us and them divide is fading. There is love of this place that unites us all. Absolute bull. It's creating a divide. We've got such a divide in this country now. I mean the UK as a whole. We got the university boffins and the educated against the rest of the population. One lot has got the power because they're in the civil service, and they're basically pushing us all around. National Food Strategy. So you go and have a look at this yourself. An independent review for government. What they're basically after is, like I've said, is removing everybody off the uplands, planting it with all this biodiversity. From what I saw in it, this is all really what NonP said in that video ages ago that I showed you. And if people haven't realised he is working for the civil service, he is, because he's actually using these figures. We are all being conned into this, But like I said, here we go. From the bottom-up cost modelling, we have considered 3 alternative farming systems. So I won't go through that. Just read at the end. Implication for jobs and livelihoods. 460,000 farm workers in the UK. Not modelled explicitly, studies in other countries suggest that job losses in intensive meat production may be balanced by jobs created in the environmental land management. 460,000 farm workers they're talking about there. These people are insane. This is a cult. I've been saying this for a long time. And I am talking about, I am non-party. This is a cross-party thing in Westminster. If I was voting in England now, I got to be honest, I'd vote Reform. None of the parties are going to stop this. If I'm in Wales at the moment, I'm going to vote Conservative because the leader of the Conservatives is a farmer like me. Or Reform. If I was in the UK now, I wouldn't vote for any of the main parties because this is what's going to happen. If I was in Scotland now, I've no idea what you'd do. Because if you vote for Labour instead of the SNP, Labour are going to get in power in the UK and this is going to be gangbusters. All I say to you people is don't stick to one party. Use your vote as something to get your job, a tool to get the job done. Now look at this here. This is what the aim of our food policy in the UK is. When looking at popular meals, meat mimicking alternatives tend to be more expensive than meat. However, switching to healthier meal substitutes is more affordable and nutritious. Look at it. They are basically going to force everybody to eat 60% less meat. I never thought I'd see the day when we had authoritarian stuff like this happening. Click onto this and read it yourself. Meat-free sausage and mashed potato. Corn filleted and vegan cheese pizza. Now, if you look at this now, changes are needed to the national diet by 2032 compared to 2019 to meet health and climate nature commitments. They want meat and gone by 2030. They want it down by 60%. Now, at the bottom here, look. A reduction in consumption of HFSS foods will take us toward the required 60% reduction in salt, 20% reduction in saturated fat, 50% reduction in sugar-frees, 30% reduction in meat, required to achieve the 5th carbon budget, and the 30 by 30 nature commitment. This represents the creation and maintenance of 410,000 hectares of woodland, maintaining and restoring 325 hectares of peatland, and managing 200,000 hectares, mainly nature, for example, heath, species-rich grassland, some of which would have been managed through conservation grazing. They want us off the land. This is basic stuff, people. If you haven't read this as a farmer, read it. That's the UK there in the middle. UK does nothing really. All farming in the UK, whatever they say, is carbon neutral. Because all the plants take in and release the same amount of carbon. And if you've got a tree and you've got a tree that replaces the pasture is just thousands of trees that were took in the same amount. Here we are again. Look, the biggest potential carbon benefit of eating less meat is the opportunity to repurpose land to sequester carbon. Look at all this. Buffalo meat, they want us gone. But then, no, rice is a great thing, and that's, as we've seen it before, that is the biggest emitter of methane in the world. More than any animals. Now this is the bit that I thought was disgraceful. If you look where the arrow is there, that's the farms, really, where the bottom 25% of all farms are making bugger all. We just managed to survive. But we're still producing food for people to eat in the country. My job is to produce food. They make it sound as if I'm doing nothing. I produce food for everybody all the time. My life is, that's what I do. And that like this. Absolutely. This is the UK policy. I'm absolutely amazed at it all. When split by income, half of farmers make a significant loss on their agricultural activities. Yes, to give all the people in the country cheap food 3 times a day. That's why. That is, the price they sell their produce doesn't even cover the cost of growing or raising it. A further quarter make a tiny profit, with the bulk of their income coming from support payments. However, the top 25% of farms make a good income from agriculture. Farms in England are unlike those on the continent. In one major way, farmers in England tend not to work together, for example. Cooperatives are widely used across Europe, both to pool resources and to increase the share of the value chain. In the UK, the combined turnover of cooperatives in 2018 was 7.7 billion. That represents just 6% of business in relative sectors. I think the thing that's going to drive people to look more closely into collaboration will be the reduction in their basic payment scheme. Now, this is what it's all about. They're going to force everybody out, says the leader of one of the UK's known farming cooperatives. You can bumble along making profit some years and not making profit other years on your farming, but comfortable in the knowledge that come December or January you get 20k coming to you. So I think without that money, suddenly farmers are going to think, oh Christ, I've got to make a profit out of this farming activity. What am I going to do? So where that arrow goes, that goes towards me. So there's a guy who's making a huge amount of money, saying to people who aren't making bugger all, but still producing food for people all the time, throughout their lives, that they should cut all their money off and let them go bankrupt. Right. What we farm. I'm reading this myself. I got to be honest with you, and I don't know what to. I can't believe this is the UK's farming policy. The third kind of waste takes form of land use. What we choose to grow and eat has a huge impact on how much land we need to feed ourselves. As we saw in Chapter 9, meat and dairy make up only a third of the calories we eat. Yet 85% of UK farmland is used feeding and rearing livestock. Around 1/6 of this is used to grow crops for animal feed, although we may buy a lot of feed in from abroad. And the remaining land is used for grazing. This is widely inefficient use of land. Growing plants for human consumption generates around 12 times more calories per hectare than using the land for meat production. Reducing meat consumption is the single most effective lever we can pull to improve the productivity of our land. They want the meat production gone. This is not in summons for everyone to go vegan. If we all just ate the amount of meat recommended by the Government Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition, most people do, but about a third of the population may eat more. National meat consumption would fall by at least 15%, and our red and processed meat consumption by 27%. The Climate Change Committee says meat production will need to fall by 20 to 50% by 2050. Its central scenario calls for 35% reduction in order for the UK to meet its net zero commitments. Eating less meat would be a lifestyle change for many, but it can hardly be described as a privation. If you usually eat meat and dairy at every meal, it could mean going without on Mondays, Tuesdays. Job done. However, the idea of being forced to cut back on meat is unpopular with many consumers. There is something culturally sacred about free-born Englishman's right to a plate of bangers on a Sunday roast. It may prove easier to reduce the meat content in ready meals and convenience foods, where alternative proteins may soon match the taste and texture. Say mince, but at a fraction of the price. Around half of the meat we currently consume is contained within processed foods. All this meat that they're talking about, the grown lab meat and vegan alternatives, is all processed food. It's nothing to do with the climate. However we go about it, the rewards of eating less would mean cutting our meat and dairy intake by 1/3 by 2050 could give us back a fifth of our farmland. The route to having it all. The benefits of cutting all this systematic waste are hard to overstate. To take perfectly plausible scenario, if we were to reduce our food waste by 50%, If we were to set our sights higher, increasing productivity by 30% or reducing meat eating by 35%, we could produce the same food from 40% less land. Both these scenarios free up enough land not just to achieve our climate goals, but also to make space for nature. This is maddening reading this. They want us out. They want stock farmers gone. Now, what they're talking about here is, during World War II, we had to, if you look in this, sorry, there's a lamb outside. We had to dig for England to feed everybody. And what they're trying to say in this graph, here, look, is how we're not far off the same level as we were in World War One. So it's World War Two, so which is all great. But if you see what I put in there, at the end of World War One to World War Two, there was only 30 million people in the UK. Now there's 70 million people in the UK. So we're producing below what we did at the end of World War Two, and we have over half as many people. These people are going to send us into a free fall. We got Doomsday Cult in charge. Now listen to all this. In this report, we have examined at length the things that have gone wrong with the food system. Now we must address an even more urgent question: how do we put them right? Now they want to get rid of meat, like I've told you. Now I've had to write this just do small bits because the video goes on for too long. We will need to change across the next 10 years if we are to meet the government's existing commitments to health, climate and nature. We will need to use more of our countryside to sequester carbon and restore nature, which means encouraging diverse methods of land management. A small amount of our farming land will be given over to native woodland, peatland, health and species-rich grasslands maintained by conservation grazing. On the remaining farmland, lower-intensity agroecological farms will sit alongside higher-yielding farms that use latest technology to maintain yields without polluting, and there will be any number of farms in between drawn from both traditions. Notice nothing of the small farms. They want us gone. Create a rural land use framework based on 3-compartment model. Now this is what I found interesting. The UK's net zero target is written into law, and its nature recovery commitments will soon follow. The only way to meet those targets is to change the way we use the land. This creates a de facto, a new land use strategy, but one that is unstructured and unstated and therefore unable to guide good local decision making. Crucially, it leaves farmers to second guess a government's priorities, further adding to the uncertainties they have to navigate. They don't want any of the farmers to decide anything. Now this is what it's all about, and this is what was also in this report. Over 3 years, the average annual cost to government to deliver these recommendations is 1.4 billion. So remember that number. That's what it's going to cost to remove most of us stock farmers from the farms. Another 250 million there. The new expenditure does not include the cost of recommendations where funding has already been secured. So they've got all that funding for the farming grants and all that. That's all sorted. Now here's the big one. So it costs 1.4 billion to get all this to happen, to chuck us all off the land. We estimate that the sugar and salt reform tax would raise 2.9 to 3.4 billion per year for the Treasury. These measures will have a long-term economic benefit of 126 billion. It's the money, people. It's nothing to do with the climate. It's money. They want to reduce the ability for us to give you and the public cheap food. They want you to make the food that you're buying at the moment 3 times as expensive, so you have to buy their crappy stuff. It's scary stuff. And also in this one now, it locks the UK in, the civil service, into not doing trade agreements with other countries, because they can't do trade agreements with other countries that don't do the same things as us. So if you haven't done a net zero in some place in Uganda or wherever, and we want to go and set up produce there, they stop you doing it. The UK Civil Service are behind all this. A subsequent report from the Trade and Agriculture Commission has made same recommendation. It proposes that the UK should only lower import tariffs if the methods used to produce the imported food matched a core set of standards representing the high standards of food production from the UK producers. This would include climate change, environmental, ethical, animal welfare measures. If trading partners cannot demonstrate equivalence with core standards, then we would not be considered for zero tariff. The civil service are stopping the UK importing stuff. Sorry, I can't carry on here. This is getting me worked up. If you've taken anything from this, people, this is it. The removal of stock farming from the UK. The removal of small farms is key to them. They want to remove the small farms and give the money to other people. They want to increase the arable land production by 10%, and they want to remove the hill production of food by 10%. So they want to remove everything off the hills. If you think I'm lying, go and have a look at this National Food Strategy, and there's more in it. I couldn't read anymore. So please comment, rate and subscribe and share this stuff if you've got this far, because I've got to be honest, it's got me down today.